Now, we have just heard that first proclamation of the combination of Lordship and Godhead, which has come down to us through the centuries and is still very popular in Ireland. Hence the permission given only to Ireland to have that in the liturgy after the consecration. We know that that experience, that moment of recognition, has been given in a supernatural way to several souls over the centuries. We know, for instance, of the by now world-famous miracle of Lanciano, but there are others, and some quite close to us. What is less well known is that modern science has been able to detect things which more primitive means could not. And there is one recent case which actually merits attention. It happened very recently in the States. Scientists had devised a very powerful sensory system. It was a breakthrough in science, and it enabled scientists to detect the aura around a living being. We seem to have a field around us. And they were hoping to be able to pick up the moment of death and separation of the two elements of our being, in one case under study. They were in a hospital and they had this newly invented machine at work, very discreetly and not in any way interfering with the medical process. So they knew that this gentleman was about to die, and they were capturing anything that might be emitting in his being, and the machine was working perfectly well. The person was, they could detect his energy level was going down and his being, as it were, was diminishing. He was petering out, and that could be picked up. Very interesting. And then, out of the blue, something happened. A gentleman walked in, quite determined, and obviously he knew what he was about. But this instrument picked up something in the case of this gentleman who walked in. There was a bright aura, energy, light coming from his coming in, but also a specific part of his being in his pocket. He himself was carrying living energy as a dynamic person, but there was a specific part of his being, actually not his body, but near it, his pocket, which was emitting something quite powerful, and it was being picked up immediately. They were following it through, and at a certain point, this new light and energy passed into the person, and that person began to have new energy and to emit amazing force and energy. Now, any of the children, can you guess what was happening?
Recovering.
No, you're way out.
Blessed Sacrament?
Yes. What was going on there?
He had it in picks.
He had it in his picks, in his pocket. That was not at all expected. But it has happened in other ways also. Do you know that way back when Blessed John Paul II was visiting America, he was well protected by bodyguards for fear of anything unexpected taking place. And he had a last-minute whip round of his schedule. He himself wanted to visit somewhere especially. It was the Grand Seminary of one of the states, perhaps Boston, and he had a great respect for a place of learning and of formation of that nature and felt it was worth a detour. But they had to prepare everything at the last minute, and so the security forces sent in sniffer dogs just to make sure there was nothing unexpected in any corner or no one about to do anything strange. And to a dog, they all went in one direction and started indicating a presence, a human being or something that they were familiar with, life. Now then, you children, where were they heading for? Where did they stop at? Any guesses?
Pub.
Before he got there. An empty church.
Tabernacle.
Yes!
Yeah.
So, and they were all kind of keen. They exactly knew that there was a presence there, so the dogs were picking it up. That was reported. But other things have happened and are still happening down the line. One day, there was a priest who was misbehaving. He had the faith, but he had bad habits. And one day, this is going back a couple of centuries now, 2 or 3, he was celebrating benediction in the evening, and he had 1 or 2 altar boys next to him. And they were kneeling there before the monstrance, before the Blessed Sacrament exposed. And it was obvious that heaven was trying to call him back to order. And at a certain point, as he was adoring with the people, he could see something, but he thought it might be an hallucination. So he turned to the altar boy next to him and asked him in French, "Can you see anything?" "Yes, the face of the Lord." So he was seeing it too. So he just had the inspiration to intone the Salve Regina, Hail Holy Queen, in the Old Latin, which you may still know, a very popular chant. And do you remember, right at the end of that, there's a word. It comes actually closer to the end in the Latin because of the construction of the sentence. Well, we just have the word show unto us, the blessed fruit of thy womb, Jesus. But in the Latin it comes right like that, ostende, at the end of the clause, because that's where verbs tend to happen. So there we were, chanting. And at that point, he was still gazing, and what happened? It became even more brilliant. Our Lady was showing in a real way. There are, in our days, also other miracles taking place which are discrete reminders. You will have noticed as a prayer group that in the last years there has been a progressive erosion of the protection of the sacred and a banalization, a profanation almost, of what hitherto was wholly other and untouchable. Now, there have been in recent times not just one, but quite a few, I understand, cases of the Lord intervening. It is a practice in some areas, if the host falls to the ground, now a priest of course would pick it up, and so would a deacon. He has a right to give himself Holy Communion, but people who have not consecrated hands or have not permission to give themselves Holy Communion, what do? They put it aside and they put it in somewhere where it's not consumed, and they put it in water and that kind of thing. Now, the Lord obviously is not too happy about this going on, so he's been indicating by a few recent unexpected surprises that he wants to be treated as Lord and God just as ever. And it has been picked up that what is happening in a few of these cases is that the host has been found the following day in water, but bleeding. And they have been analysing these cases, and in each case they found it's true blood. And the Lord obviously is in his gentlemanly way saying, I'm still God, I'm still Lord, and you are taking away my honour. In one of the Old Testament prophets, we have this strong passage, if I am king, where is my honour? That applies to us. So in a group like this, it is a chance to do that. You did well in preparing quietly with the rosary, well said, and with a personalised invocation each time between the decades, very pleasing to heaven, orientating the prayer, and also by the calm way in which you are receiving. The priest straight away picks up the vibes. Each of you here is in prayer, is receptive. That makes a huge difference. If one goes to some areas, one feels something of what the Lord's heart may feel when he finds that they don't want to listen. All they want to do is get away. Now, there are some signs that is the case. They are impatient at the sermon. They start fiddling with mobile phones or looking at their watches. They're not receptive. The word is going over their heads and not having any impact. But there are other things almost more grave. They come to the most sacred moment of their day or of their week, and a large proportion is still actually going out of church at that point after receiving Holy Communion. And I was listening recently to people who were saying that at both a very large cathedral celebration of the Easter Vigil, that's the main liturgy of the whole year, I won't say which cathedral it wasn't ours, but there, a large proportion, something like 40%, but less 30, but I think it was between 30 and 40%, had gone out immediately after Holy Communion. It was a long celebration and they had done their duty. And even I hear that in the celebrations at the Eucharistic Congress, which was there to honour the Lord in the Eucharist, it was happening there too. There were people actually going out immediately after communion. Now, do you see how frustrated the Lord is? Because he is coming with a package of grace each time, and the graces are falling in vain. And there are other indications that that is the case. The notion of speeding up that sacred moment to the utmost and regarding it as the worst possible disaster liturgically if it takes more than a few minutes is an indication that we have not really understood what's going on a profound level. That is the encounter between heaven and earth for a parish or a prayer group or a convent. And if that is the least important part of our week, our day, and that everything is done so it will be as brief as possible, there is something that we have not understood. We are doing all kinds of things in order to get our programming of pastoral strategies and all the rest of it perfect. But the divine, where is it? When it's on offer, we're fidgeting, we're not present to the encounter. So it's questionable whether liturgically and even theologically it has a lot of sense to do all in one's strength to accelerate the process of Holy Communion, even on a weekday actually. Because if at that point we're not available to the surprises that heaven is potentially pouring upon us, we're missing the point. We have not understood our faith. We're in charge, and God can't get a word in edgeways. This, perhaps, would have been something which could have been put into relief in the Eucharistic Congress and its build-up. Not the spectacular so much as the mystical. Because if that is not there, the interior life of the Church is not there. We're doing something human. And something human will have a human effect. So at least in a prayer group, and in people like yourself who went to a specific prayer of adoration, I would suggest, come to your adoration with this on your heart. It's matter for reparation. For the Lord is raising up everywhere in Ireland centres of reparation. And when they're authentic, when people have an eyeball-to-eyeball encounter with Jesus in the monstrance, they may not see something like that, although actually that kind of thing sometimes happens. The other day I had adoration in my hermitage and a lady was there and she's very balanced, and she said afterwards she was wondering whether I had seen anything as well, but there was something strange in the monstrance. So surprises do happen, and I can tell you, healings do happen, because I do Eucharistic healing quite often. And I'm not surprised when next time I go around to somewhere, someone comes up and say, there was a healing last week or last month. Because it's the same Lord who walked through Galilee, who's walking through the assembly. And when the people like yourself, open, unclogged by mortal sin, that same healing touch can go to the depths of the being and make us whole. And why shouldn't it be? It's the same God. Why is one more powerful than the other on occasion? Because he's free to act. Because people are still. And that's what happens in these groups, in these places of prayer and retreat. Stillness. Because God is a God of stillness. And if he comes into an assembly which is just itching and fidgeting to get away, he says, okay, I respect your wish, but I have more in store for you.